Okay, so let's talk about Chapter 18, the reproductive system. We are going to start with male reproductive and then head into female. So let me get this up and running. There we go. So basically, we're going to go through the major structures of the reproductive system, starting with the testis, where sperm are produced, and then talk about accessory glands along the way, along the male reproductive tract. So these are all listed here, and then we'll get to the external genitalia last. There's a figure of all those structures that we'll talk about, including the tract. And a tract is a series of tubes. So there's just sections of that tube that we will get to along the way. And we will talk about the entire time the path of spermatozoa. So basically, from the epididymis, where the testis sends spermatozoa to mature, through the ductus deferens and ejaculatory duct to the urethra. So this is the path that spermatozoa take from where they're produced to where they're expelled from the body along the reproductive tract, basically. And here's a sagittal section view of these particular structures as well. So the testis is where sperm is produced, epididymis is where it matures, and then the ductus or vas deferens transports those sperm to the ejaculatory duct here and into the urethra. So this long tube is the reproductive tract. And obviously the urethra is shared by the urinary tract and the reproductive tract. So there's some crossover. And there's some glands, again, along the way that are accessory glands, like the seminal gland, the prostate gland here, and then the bulbourethral gland as well. So we'll get into all of those. We're going to start with some structures in the scrotum, which is what surrounds the testis. Two of which actually are muscles. One is a smooth muscle called the dartos muscle that is located kind of embedded in the skin of the scrotum, and that contracts and relaxes to maintain or modulate the temperature within the testis that is tightly regulated. The cremaster muscle surrounds the testis as well, but contracts to move the testis closer and farther away from the body, one for temperature control, but also two for protection. Typically during sexual intercourse, to bring the testis closer to the body so it doesn't get damaged. And there's a serous membrane. We talked about serous membranes previously, like the visceral and parietal pericardium. There's the visceral and parietal pleura and the visceral and parietal peritoneum. These are serous membranes. There's another layer of serous membranes that line the scrotal cavity that protect the testis as well. So we'll talk a little bit about those. And within the testis resides seminiferous tubules, where sperm production actually occurs. The first part of this reproductive tract is this wound network of seminiferous tubules where sperm are produced. Once they're produced in the seminiferous tubules, sperm are moved to the reedy testis, which is it's just basically passageways to transport sperm from where they're produced in the seminiferous tubules to the epididymis by way of small ductules called efferent ductules that merge together to form the epididymis. So take a look at these structures here. These purple structures all in here are seminiferous tubules. They are separated into lobules in the testis. So let's go through what we've got here. We've got the scrotum, which is mostly skin. Just deep to that is the dartos muscle. And then internal to that is the cremaster muscle, surrounds the testis. And then the serous membranes. So this thin layer here, there's my dog, this thin layer here is the parietal and visceral layers of that serous membrane. And those serous membranes, again, surround and protect the testis and secrete fluid in here into this scrotal cavity. So the seminiferous tubules are here. The reedy testis is this structure here that transports sperm from where it's produced in the seminiferous tubules to the efferent ductules that become and create the epididymis, where sperm is stored temporarily until it's ejaculated and it's allowed to mature. The sperm is allowed to mature there. And once sperm is matured and is leaving the epididymis, it heads it is transported, they are transported right into the vas deferens or ductus deferens. Spermatogenesis basically occurs in the seminiferous tubules. There are stem cells called spermatogonia that contain 23 pairs of chromosomes. Through the process of spermatogenesis, these stem cells produce spermatozoa. So let's talk about spermiogenesis as well. So spermiogenesis is the actual physical maturation of a spermatid into a spermatozoan or a sperm. So basically, the spermatogonian, right, in spermatogenesis undergoes mitosis. So there's a division, a cell division, and then meiosis is initiated by a primary spermatocyte, where you get division of the chromosomes. So each one of these cells now has 23 chromosomes in each cell instead of 46. And then in meiosis 2, there's an equal number of an equal amount of DNA sent to each of these 4 spermatids that eventually mature into, by way of spermiogenesis. So up until this point, this is spermatogenesis, right? So here's spermatogenesis. Mitosis divides. Primary spermatocytes are diploid, so they've got 23 pairs of chromosomes. And then these spermatocytes undergo meiosis, and undergoing meiosis allows this original diploid cell to split into haploid cells, which is 23 chromosomes instead of 23 pairs, so half the number of chromosomes, into secondary spermatocytes. And then those secondary spermatocytes undergo meiosis 2, where you then have a haploid spermatid that is able to mature into a spermatozoa or a sperm, so that can fertilize also a haploid oocyte in the female reproductive system and create a baby. So in the structure of a sperm, there's some important structures. The acrosome is part of is a layer of tissue that surrounds the head, and the acrosome can, right here, this kind of purple layer, this whole structure here is the head of the sperm. So this whole layer here surrounds the head of the sperm. It's called the acrosome, and it contains and secretes enzymes that break through part of the wall that is protecting and surrounding the oocyte, the egg, and helps basically facilitate fertilization. The neck contains centrioles. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Here, the mid piece is what contains mitochondria, which is producing tons of ATP that allows and provides energy to the tail. Here, which is also called the flagellum, and that basically moves the sperm, propels it forward into where fertilization can occur. Now, hormones related to sperm production. Testosterone is primarily basically produced by what's called interstitial cells. They're also called Leydig cells, Leydig. And they are cells outside of the seminiferous tubules. So think in the interstitium outside of the seminiferous tubules. Within the seminiferous tubules, there's another set of cells called nurse cells. They're also called Sertoli cells that basically nourish and provide nutrients to the sperm to allow them to grow. They play a role in hormonal regulation, but their major job is to basically nurse sperm as they're maturing. GnRH, this molecule here, this hormone here, is a hypothalamic hormone. It's called gonadotropin releasing hormone. RH is releasing hormone. This GnRH is what stimulates the production of luteinizing hormone as well as follicle stimulating hormone from the pituitary gland. And luteinizing hormone being produced from the pituitary gland targets interstitial cells to stimulate them to produce testosterone. Follicle stimulating hormone, another pituitary hormone, targets nurse cells that helps them, stimulates them to release all of the nutrients and enzymes that are needed for spermatogenesis from nurse cells, and basically promotes that mechanism, but also promotes the production of a hormone called inhibin, which basically feeds back in a negative feedback manner to inhibit the production of FSH. There's the endocrine feedback loop. We kind of talked a little bit about this in the endocrine system way back when, and I said we'd come back and talk about this again later, so here it is. So these accessory glands, any accessory gland along a tract produces some kind of fluid or enzymes or something that will facilitate the goal of the system it's located in. And the seminal vesicles or seminal glands produce basically a fluid that makes up about 60% of semen. So as the seminal glands meet up with the vas deferens, the ductus deferens, as sperm is making its way through that tubule, it provides semen. And basically that fluid is what is sent into the ejaculatory duct and is mixed in with sperm. The prostate gland produces 20 to 30% of semen, total volume, and provides a fluid that has an antibiotic property, which is really important to keeping the sperm safe and healthy along its route. And lastly, the bulbourethral gland is at the base of the penis, and the ducts empty into the urethra. And that fluid is thick and alkaline, so it's slightly basic as opposed to acidic, and it provides this mucousy alkaline fluid that helps lubricate the penis, the tip of the penis, but also helps neutralize any residual urine that may be very acidic in the urethra as semen makes its way into that tubule. And that, again, just helps keep sperm safe and healthy. So here's these three accessory structures. Right here's the seminal gland. So as sperm makes its way from the epididymis through the vas deferens to where it meets here at the ejaculatory duct, the seminal gland and its duct is emptying, basically sending semen, seminal fluid, into this duct as well. And that empties into the first part of the urethra called the prostatic urethra, around which the prostate surrounds. The prostate then secretes another type of fluid that has antibiotic properties, mixing with seminal fluid, and then the sperm with some fluid coming from the vas deferens to create most of semen. And then as it makes its way into what's called the membranous urethra, this part here, further down the urethra, the bulbourethral gland empties that, sends that thick alkaline fluid into the urethra as well to mix with semen and protect the sperm as it makes its way externally. Last structure we'll talk about is the penis. So it's a tubular organ that contains the urethra. There's three sections of the urethra, one of which is actually in the penis itself. And it basically conducts urine to the exterior, but it also introduces semen into the female's vagina. So during ejaculation and during sexual intercourse, it's major job. So it is, again, shared by the urinary system and the reproductive systems. And then externally, there's genitalia, the portion of the penis called the glans. That's the distal end that surrounds the external urethral orifice. And the prepuce is also the foreskin, which is basically a fold of skin that surrounds the tip of the penis. So there's structures here. The urethra runs through this section here. There's a superior section of the penis with erectile tissue called the corpus cavernosum. There's two bands of this tissue. And then the corpus spongiosum is surrounded by the corpus cavernosum. And the corpus spongiosum is where basically the urethra runs through to the glans. And the external urethral orifice is here. And then the prepuce or foreskin is here. So these erectile tissues I mentioned, the corpus cavernosum and the corpus spongiosum. I mentioned the corpus spongiosum has the urethra that runs through it. The corpus cavernosum it's all erectile tissue, so it has a lot of blood vessels that run through it. With the corpus cavernosum, think about it, a cavern kind of covering over top of the corpus spongiosum, and that expands to form the glans as well, that external portion of the genitalia. So a couple of things before we finish up this particular half of chapter 18 is prostate cancer. And I mention it because it's the second most common cancer and second most common cancer cause of death in males. So it can be really serious, but it can be screened for. You can look for in a blood test, which is a really simple test with something called the prostate specific antigen. And elevated levels of that can indicate prostate cancer, which is very, very, very treatable if you catch it early. Treatment involves radiation or surgical removal of the prostate gland. Usually if there's prostatic cancer, it puts pressure and can cause problems with urination on the urethra that runs through the prostate gland. So it can be deadly. But normal screenings and annual checkups can help prevent this and catch it early. So it's super treatable. So here's what happens, right? So you have an enlarged prostate. Look at the urethra that runs through here, right? Here's the bladder, right? So urine's supposed to flow through there and it ends up getting backed up. So basically what happens is the prostatic urethra gets constricted and it makes it difficult to urinate in males. So one of the first signs or symptoms is difficulty urinating. If you have that problem, if you know somebody that does, send them to the doctor right away. Again, annual or typical screenings can really help prevent that. Testicular cancer is actually the most common cancer in males aged 15 to 35, but it's a really low rate if you include all ages. More than 95% of testicular cancers come from abnormal spermatogonia or spermatocytes, and the treatment is typically chemotherapy or removing the testis. But the survival rate is super high as long as early diagnosis and early detection occurs, and treatments are always improving. Okay, so I will see you in the second half of this chapter for female reproduction. See you soon.